Hello, this is Dr. Jessie Blackburn, and I want to welcome you all to the first assignment in English 2001. This is the composition project number 1, also known as the literacy narrative, and you'll see this in week 1 of our As You Learn learning module. So this particular assignment, like every assignment, every major writing assignment, has a midnight deadline of Wednesday so that we all can take Thursday to peer review and post reviews and also do virtual conferences with me. So this particular assignment then is due by Wednesday at midnight in week 2 of the term. I want to go over the assignment with you now so that you can hear from me how to approach this and then follow up with me either through email or through telephone or any kind of virtual conferencing that would work for you. So the goal of this assignment then is for you to compose a polished, coherent, and organized version of your critical literacy narrative. And the literacy narrative is an essay that highlights the literacy stories that come to mind for you, and that can either be in a chronologic or a thematic order as long as it expresses a claim or a thesis that you might want to make about literacy. So for example, some people think that literacy is how one achieves power or agency, or that literacy, or through our literacy, we express our identity. What we read, what we write about expresses our identity. Others argue that literacy is how we creatively connect to the world around us. And still others would argue that literacy helps them gain cultural awareness. So for people who've maybe never left the United States of America, by reading about cultures and religions and artifacts from around the world, that you can gain cultural awareness. In any case, you want to come up with what you believe is a thesis or a claim that you would like to make about literacy, and then you will use your own literacy narrative to help illustrate this. So the goal then is to synthesize your personal literacy timeline. So in other words, the actual timeline of your own reading and writing life, along with a global claim or a claim outside of your own literacy narrative that you would like to make. So how it is that your personal literacy timeline reflects this thesis or this larger claim you're making about literacy. And you want to use that thesis to help depict as well as interpret the arc of your own literacy timeline. So you're going to write 2 versions of this draft. One which goes up Wednesday at midnight of the second week of the term, and that you're going to post independently to As You Learn, and you'll post it there for peer review, and you'll also virtually conference with me about that draft, and one revised draft then based on that feedback that will go into your e-portfolio at the end of the term. And included along with that final draft would be a reflective cover letter that will detail the how, the what, and the why behind the revisions that you make between draft 1 and the peer review feedback that you get, the meeting with me that we'll do virtually, and then the actual revisions that you'll make. So the literacy narrative has some specific learning objectives. The first goal is that you write a narrative of 3.5 or more pages that narrates your development as a learner, a thinker, and a writer. So some students like to start out with the very first book they remember reading on their own, or some students like to start out with remembering what it was like to have their parents read to them. I know in my case, when I think about my literacy timeline, I think about a particular book that my grandfather had on his shelf in his library that I read one day, and that really kind of helped shape my life and the way I think about the world, and certainly the way I think about the world being a young woman at the time that I was reading this book. It was Joan of Arc. And so from there, I could argue that the books that I read, and ultimately what I write about, can be traced back to that one particular text, and I can make connections about between texts and then to the larger thesis or the claim that I might make about literacy in general, for everyone, not just for me. You also want to make sure that you write an introductory paragraph that includes an opening that raises your reader's interest and leads to a clear main thesis or a claim about literacy. So that hook, what is it that makes your reader want to keep reading, and also does your reader understand clearly what the goal of your essay might be? Your body paragraphs want to connect back to your thesis, and they want to tell an interesting, well-developed story using specific details, effective examples, and sensory language. You also want to compose ending paragraphs that connect back to your thesis and bring the discussion to an interesting close and include a reflective moment about the impact on your development and learning process. You want to make sure that you construct your narrative in a logically organized fashion. So for some, it might be a chronologic order. For others, it might be a thematic order. It really is your literacy narrative. There's no right or wrong way, as long as there's an intentional choice that you're making and one that flows logically for your reader. You want to make sure that you use correct and consistent use of spelling, grammar, and mechanics throughout your draft. And then, of course, ultimately you'll participate in the virtual conference with me, and you'll also give full, thoughtful, and supportive feedback to 2 or more of your peers in the class on their literacy narrative. So draft 1 is a complete rough draft in that it is still under construction but complete. So in other words, the first draft that you submit by midnight on Wednesday, it must be composed entirely, not just a few paragraphs. It's not just an outline. It is a full rough draft. But it's rough in that you're still working out some of the kinks and you're still using the writing process to help you think through some of these larger claims. So the goal is to think about your life and history as a learner and thinker, both inside and outside the academic realm. Your literacy narrative is your opportunity to tell the story, or maybe interconnected stories, about the roles that reading and writing played in your life personally, academically, professionally. You should discuss in this paper your literacy, how you became literate, and why reading and writing are important to you. Who are the literacy sponsors in your life? Were they people, or was it a place? Was it an after-school theater club that you were a member of? Was it a summer camp that you went to and you started writing to your parents while you were away, and that's when suddenly you realized that writing was key for you? So in other words, your literacy sponsors can be people, but they can also be events. Perhaps it's a specific text. A lot of students look to Harry Potter as a literacy sponsor, and they see that as the first really long, full-length book series that really taught them about identifying with characters and using some of the life lessons from a text to help them grow individually in their own lives. So you'll also want to talk about how literacy shaped the worlds available to you throughout your life and your future. How has your literacy been entangled with your specific lived experiences, maybe your race and ethnicity or your religion? Also, you should discuss the types of literacy you have learned, developed, and hope to continue in, especially given the fact that this is an introduction to writing across the curriculum course. And so this is a course that's going to help you start thinking about what writing and reading might look like in your major. So you want to talk about how you learned about your specific discipline or field and what discourse you eventually hope to master in order to further your education and compete in the job market. Above all, this essay should be a coherent focus on your literacy throughout your personal, academic, and professional life so far, and you should connect that to that theme or that claim or that thesis that you're making about what literacy means on a global level. But lastly, do remember this is your writing. You own it. And don't forget that part of this process is your own response to 2 other peers' drafts. So please do consider using full, thoughtful, and supportive feedback. And of course, use the peer review guidelines that are found on our As You Learn site. And of course, we'll also be meeting virtually to conference together.